Victoria Sterling slammed her fist against the frozen window, her knuckles splitting against the ice. "I don't share beds with employees," she screamed into the howling darkness. But the storm didn't care about her billion-dollar empire. It didn't care about her rules. Marcus Thompson, the quiet black single father she'd barely noticed for 3 years, stood behind her, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Then you'll die tonight, ma'am. Your choice." She turned to face him, blood dripping from her hand onto the snow-covered floor. For the first time in 20 years, Victoria Sterling had no power, no control, no escape. What happened in that room would destroy everything she believed about strength, about weakness, about the walls she'd spent a lifetime building. Comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. The phone hit the mahogany desk with enough force to crack the screen. Absolutely not. Victoria Sterling didn't raise her voice. She never needed to. 20 years of climbing over bodies in boardrooms had taught her that true power whispered. It didn't shout. Her assistant Rebecca flinched anyway. "Ms. Sterling, the Weather Service upgraded it to a severe warning. The mountain roads... I don't care if God himself is throwing snowballs." Victoria grabbed her coat from the rack, not bothering to look at the younger woman trembling near the door. "The Harrison Creek site is 3 weeks behind schedule. 3 weeks. Do you know what that costs per day? $400,000, ma'am. $427,000. Victoria finally turned her ice-blue eyes drilling into Rebecca. "I built this company from a 2-room office and a maxed-out credit card. I didn't get here by hiding from weather." Rebecca swallowed hard. "Your helicopter pilot refused to fly. The rental car company canceled all reservations. The only vehicle available is..." "What?" "The company truck. The one assigned to the Harrison Creek site manager." Victoria's jaw tightened. "Which site manager?" "Marcus Thompson, ma'am." The name meant nothing to her. 3 years he'd worked for Sterling Enterprises, and Victoria couldn't have picked him out of a lineup. He was just another name on payroll, another cog in her machine. That would change tonight. Marcus Thompson sat in the parking garage engine running heat blasting, waiting for a woman he'd never actually met face to face. He knew her, of course. Everyone at Sterling Enterprises knew Victoria Sterling. The Ice Queen, they called her behind closed doors. The woman who fired a project manager on Christmas Eve for missing a deadline. The CEO who hadn't taken a vacation in 15 years. His phone buzzed. A picture from his mother Jalen grinning at the camera, chocolate smeared across his cheeks, holding up a crayon drawing of a dinosaur. "My little man," Marcus whispered, smiling despite himself. Jalen was 7 years old, all energy and questions and bedtime stories that ran too long. 3 years ago, Maya had kissed them both goodbye, gone to her chemotherapy appointment, and never come home. Brain bleed, complications. Medical terms that meant nothing except that Marcus was suddenly alone, raising a 4-year-old who kept asking when mommy was coming back. He'd rebuilt his life brick by brick. Steady job, good benefits. A small apartment with a room for Jalen painted with dinosaurs on the walls. Nothing fancy, but it was theirs. The passenger door ripped open and Victoria Sterling slid in like she owned the vehicle. Which technically she did. "You're Marcus Thompson." "Yes, ma'am." He extended his hand. She didn't take it. "Let's go. We're already behind." Marcus withdrew his hand slowly, noting the dismissal without comment. He'd survived worse than rudeness. He'd survived grief. He pulled out of the garage into the gray afternoon. Snow was already falling, light lazy flakes that seemed almost gentle. "The weather report says it'll clear by evening," Victoria said, scrolling through her tablet. "We can inspect the site, review the delays, and return before midnight." Marcus glanced at the sky. 47 years of living in Colorado had taught him things no weather app could. The clouds weren't right. The air pressure had been dropping all day. His bad knee, the one he'd injured in the army, was aching in that particular way it only did before serious storms. "Ma'am, I've been watching this system all day. I don't think..." "I didn't ask what you think. Victoria didn't look up from her tablet. I asked you to drive. Marcus pressed his lips together, counted to 5 in his head, thought of Jalen's smile of the paycheck that kept a roof over their heads. Yes, ma'am. The first hour passed in silence. Victoria worked on her tablet, making calls that Marcus tried not to overhear. Negotiations, acquisitions, numbers with so many zeros, they seemed abstract. He thought about his own numbers. The $847 in his checking account. The $12,000 still owed on Maya's medical bills despite the insurance. The $50 birthday gift he was planning to buy Jalen next month. Different worlds separated by leather seats. How long have you worked for me? Victoria asked, suddenly not looking up. 3 years, ma'am. Started 6 months after my wife passed. I didn't ask about your wife. Marcus's hands tightened on the wheel. No, ma'am, you didn't. Silence again. But it felt different now, heavier, charged with something uncomfortable. Victoria finally looked up from her screen. I don't do small talk, Thompson. It's nothing personal. I find it inefficient. Understood. Good. She returned to her work, but Marcus caught something in her reflection on the window glass. Just for a moment, her mask had slipped. Something flickered across her face, not cruelty, but exhaustion. Loneliness, maybe. The look of someone who'd been running so long she'd forgotten why. Then it was gone, replaced by the familiar steel. The snow thickened as they climbed into the mountains. Marcus watched the road disappear, inch by inch, swallowed by white. His knee was screaming now, a deep, persistent ache that meant bad news. Ma'am, I need to tell you something. If it's not about the sight, I don't want to hear it. It's about the storm. Victoria sighed dramatically, finally setting down her tablet. What about it? This isn't a normal snowfall. This is going to be a whiteout. Probably last all night. We need to turn around. We're more than halfway there. Turning around would waste. Turning around might save our lives. The words hung in the air between them. Victoria turned slowly to face him, and for the first time, Marcus saw genuine emotion in her eyes. Anger. Pure, unfiltered anger. Do you know who you're talking to? Yes, ma'am. I'm talking to someone who's never been stuck in a mountain storm. And you have... Marcus kept his eyes on the road, hands steady. 3 times. Once during my army days, once with my wife before she got sick, and once when I was 17, driving my mama to her dialysis appointment in a borrowed car with bald tires. And what happened? Army mission, we lost 2 men to hypothermia before rescue came. With my wife, we spent 2 days in the car running the engine for heat until we almost ran out of gas. With my mama, he paused. We got lucky. Found a church. Pastor let us sleep in the basement. Victoria stared at him. You're serious? Dead serious, ma'am. These mountains don't care about money or schedules. They don't negotiate. For a long moment, she said nothing. Marcus could almost see the calculations running behind her eyes. Costs, delays, reputation. 1 more hour, she finally said. If it gets worse, we find shelter. It was the first compromise Marcus had ever seen Victoria Sterling make. He didn't know it then, but it would be the first of many. The GPS died 40 minutes later. One moment it was guiding them along the mountain road. The next, the screen flickered and went black. Victoria grabbed her phone. No signal. She tried her backup phone, same result. What the hell is happening? Marcus pointed through the windshield at the wall of white rushing toward them. That's happening. The storm hit like a physical blow. 1 second they could see 20 feet ahead. The next visibility dropped to nothing. Wind slammed against the truck, rocking it on its wheels. Snow piled against the windows faster than the wipers could clear it. Victoria grabbed the dashboard. Pull over. Can't see the edge of the road. Don't know where the drop-off is. Then stop. If we stop here, we get buried. Need to find shelter. Marcus leaned forward, squinting into the chaos. His hands were calm on the wheel, movements precise. He'd done this before. Not exactly this, but close enough. Victoria watched him navigate the impossible, and something shifted in her chest. Not gratitude, not yet, but the first crack in her certainty. She was used to being the most competent person in any room. Right now, she was useless. And Marcus Thompson, the man she'd dismissed without a second thought, was the only thing standing between her and disaster. "There," Marcus said suddenly. "Light. You see it." Victoria squinted through the white. Nothing. Then yes. A faint yellow glow, barely visible, flickering like a dying candle. "I see it." Marcus aimed the truck toward that tiny beacon of hope. The vehicle slid twice, tires spinning on ice, but he corrected each time with the ease of long practice. The light grew brighter. Shapes emerged from the storm, a building low and weathered with a wooden sign swinging violently in the wind. "Mountain Rest Lodge," Victoria read aloud. "Never heard of it." "Doesn't matter. It's got walls and it's got heat." Marcus pulled the truck into a small clearing and killed the engine. "Ready to run." "I don't run." Marcus almost laughed. "Tonight you do." He counted to 3, then threw open his door. The cold hit him like a punch to the face, vicious, biting, immediately dangerous. He forced himself around the truck to Victoria's side and yanked open her door. "Move." For once she didn't argue. They ran together through the screaming wind, Victoria's expensive heels sliding on ice, until Marcus grabbed her elbow and half-dragged her toward the lodge's entrance. The door gave way, and they tumbled inside. The lodge's interior was dim-heated by a wood-burning stove that glowed orange in the corner. An elderly white man sat behind a worn wooden counter, looking up with more resignation than surprise. "Storm got you." Marcus nodded, still catching his breath. "Road disappeared. GPS went dead. Need shelter. You and half the mountain if anyone else was foolish enough to be out." The caretaker, his name tag read Howard, stood slowly, joints cracking. "Only got one room left. Last one went to a couple about an hour ago." "One room is fine," Marcus said. "Actually, that's not," Victoria started. "One room is fine," Marcus repeated harder this time. He turned to Victoria, keeping his voice low but firm. "Ma'am, we don't have choices right now. We have survival." Victoria's eyes flashed. "I'm not sharing a room with..." "With what?" "An employee, a stranger." Marcus stepped closer, and for the first time, Victoria noticed how tall he was. How solid. "Lady, I've got a 7-year-old son at home who's waiting for his daddy to come back. I don't care about your comfort or your reputation or whatever else is running through your head right now. I care about not dying. You should too." The caretaker watched this exchange with the tired patience of a man who'd seen too many storms and too many people who didn't respect them. "Room's up the stairs into the hall," Howard said finally. "Heat's unreliable. Power might go out. There's extra blankets in the closet." He paused. "And there's only one bed." The words landed between Victoria and Marcus like a bomb. "You're joking," Victoria said flatly. "Do I look like I'm joking?" Howard grabbed a key from behind the counter. "This ain't the Ritz, ma'am. It's a mountain lodge in a blizzard. You're lucky there's walls and a roof." Victoria turned to Marcus. Her expression caught between fury and something else, something that might have been fear if she'd allowed herself to acknowledge it. "There has to be another option." "There isn't." Marcus took the key from Howard. "Thank you, sir. We'll manage." He started up the stairs without looking back. After a long moment, Victoria followed. The room was exactly what Howard had promised, small, sparse, and barely adequate. A single narrow bed occupied most of the space, covered with a faded quilt that had seen better decades. A nightstand held a battery-powered lantern. A radiator against the wall hissed and clanked, pushing out heat that felt like a suggestion rather than a guarantee. Marcus set down his work bag and assessed the situation with the methodical calm of someone who'd learned to find solutions in impossible circumstances. Victoria stood near the doorcoat, still on arms wrapped around herself. "I'll sleep in the truck. You'll die in the truck. Then I'll stay in the lobby. Howard said the stove down there barely keeps the common area warm. This room has the radiator. This is where we stay." "I don't—" Victoria's voice cracked slightly. She caught it forced steel back into her words. "I don't share beds with people." Marcus turned to face her fully. In the dim light, she looked different than she did in the boardroom photos, smaller somehow. More human. "Ma'am, I've been married. I've got a son. I've spent 3 years grieving a woman I loved more than anything in this world. The last thing I'm thinking about right now is anything inappropriate. I'm thinking about heat shelter and getting home to my boy." Victoria met his eyes, really met them for the first time since she'd gotten in his truck. What she saw there surprised her. Not hostility, not judgment. Just steady, patient certainty. "I'll take the floor," Marcus continued. "You take the bed. We'll figure out—" The power went out. The radiator fell silent mid-sentence, its feeble heat disappearing instantly. The lantern flickered once, then stabilized, casting weak shadows across the room, and the cold began to seep in. Within 30 minutes, Victoria's teeth were chattering. She sat on the bed wrapped in the quilt and both extra blankets, and she couldn't stop shaking. The cold was unlike anything she'd experienced, not the crisp chill of a New York winter, or the dry bite of a Colorado ski trip. This was predatory. It crawled under her clothes, sank into her bones, turned her breath to fog that hung in the air. Marcus sat on the floor back against the wall, his own coat wrapped tight around him. He was shivering too, but less violently. Years of hard work had built a body that retained heat better than Victoria's lean frame. "Temperature's dropping fast," he said quietly. "Probably 30 degrees in here. Going to get colder." How much colder?" "Don't know. Storm could last all night." Victoria hugged herself tighter. "What do we do?" The question cost her something. She could hear it in her voice. Victoria Sterling didn't ask what to do. She told people what to do. Marcus looked at her, really looked, and saw the fear she was trying to hide. The arrogance was gone. The Ice Queen act was melting under the real ice creeping into the room. "Ma'am, I'm going to say something, and I need you to hear it without pride." "What?" He stood joints stiff from the cold and moved toward the bed. "Body heat is the only reliable warmth we have. The blankets alone won't be enough. We need to share the bed." "No. Not a choice anymore." "I said no." Marcus stopped at the edge of the mattress. "Why? Give me a real reason, not corporate policy." Victoria's jaw tightened. Her whole body was shaking now, not just from cold, but from something deeper. Something she'd spent 20 years burying. "Because I don't—" She stopped, started again. "Because I haven't—" "Haven't what?" The words came out so quietly, he almost missed them. "I haven't let anyone that close in a very long time." Marcus absorbed that. The confession hung between them, raw and unexpected. "Neither have I," he said finally. "Not since Maya. 3 years and I haven't—" "It's not about that. It's about survival. Just two people trying not to freeze to death. Nothing more." Victoria looked up at him, and for one unguarded moment, she wasn't a CEO or a boss or a billion-dollar empire in human form. She was just a woman alone and frightened, facing a long, cold night. "Rules?" she whispered. "Whatever you need. Fully clothed, no crossing, boundaries." "Agreed. And we never speak of this." Marcus almost smiled. "Speak of what?" They lay side by side, rigid as boards, separated by inches that felt like miles. Victoria stared at the ceiling, acutely aware of everything: the sound of Marcus's breathing, the warmth radiating from his body, the way the mattress dipped slightly toward him. Outside, the storm howled like something alive, rattling the window in its frame. She couldn't remember the last time she'd been this physically close to another human being. Business handshakes didn't count. Neither did the occasional awkward embrace at charity galas. Real closeness, the kind that required trust, she'd eliminated from her life years ago. Marcus lay still beside her, equally conscious of the invisible walls between them. 3 years of loneliness had taught him to keep his distance, to protect what little he had left. Letting anyone in meant risking loss again, and he couldn't survive another loss. Yet here he was, inches from a stranger, sharing warmth because the alternative was death. "You said you have a son," Victoria said suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Jalen. He's 7. What's he like?" The question surprised him. "Why do you want to know?" "Because I need something to think about besides how cold I am." Fair enough. Marcus shifted slightly, allowing himself to remember. He's everything. Smart as hell. Curious about everything dinosaur space, how airplanes stay up. He's got Maya's smile, my stubbornness. Drives me crazy some days, but I wouldn't trade a single minute. "He's with your mother tonight." "Yeah. She moved in after Maya died. Said she wasn't letting her grandson grow up without a woman's influence." He paused. "She's the reason I survived those first months. Her and Jalen." Victoria processed this. A family, a support system, a reason to keep going. "What happened?" she asked quietly. "To your wife?" Marcus was silent for a long moment. The question would have been intrusive from anyone else under any other circumstances. But something about this night, the darkness, the cold, the forced intimacy, made normal rules feel distant. "Cancer," he finally said. "Started in her breast, spread everywhere. By the time they found it, there wasn't much they could do. 15 months from diagnosis to the end." "I'm sorry." She was 34 years old, healthy her whole life, never smoked, barely drank, ran 3 miles every morning. His voice stayed steady, but there was an old wound beneath the words. "Doesn't matter how careful you are. Life doesn't play fair." Victoria turned that over in her mind. "No," she said softly. "It doesn't." The temperature continued to drop. Victoria's shivering intensified despite the blankets, despite Marcus's proximity. Her body wasn't built for this too lean, too little insulation. She'd spent years maintaining a physique that looked good in boardrooms and magazine covers, never considering it might one day fail to keep her alive. Marcus felt her trembling and made a decision. Without asking permission, he shifted closer and placed his arm across her back. Victoria stiffened instantly. "What are you? You're going into hypothermia. I've seen it before." "I'm fine." "Your lips are turning blue. That's not fine." She wanted to argue, to push him away, to maintain the boundaries she'd insisted on. But her body betrayed her, leaning into his warmth, involuntarily seeking heat, like a plant seeking sun. Marcus held her carefully, professionally, the way he might hold anyone who was freezing. But something shifted in that moment, something neither of them could name. The walls between them, built from status and grief and years of self-protection, began to crack. "Tell me something," Victoria said through chattering teeth. "Something to keep me awake." "What do you want to know?" "Anything. Everything. I don't care." So Marcus talked. He told her about growing up in Detroit, about his father who worked 3 jobs and still never missed a basketball game, about joining the army because college wasn't affordable, about learning to survive in places that made this storm look gentle, about meeting Maya at a grocery store of all places when they reached for the same avocado. "She laughed at me," Marcus said, and Victoria could hear the smile in his voice even in the darkness. "Said anyone who bought avocados at that price deserved to be alone. I told her I'd buy every avocado in the store if she'd have dinner with me." "Did she?" "Took 3 weeks of showing up at the same grocery store before she said yes." Victoria found herself almost smiling. "That's persistence. That's love. I knew the moment I saw her. Don't ask me how. Some things you just know." The storm screamed outside, But inside the tiny room, something fragile was forming. Not romance, not yet, maybe not ever, but understanding. Two people seeing each other clearly for the first time. "I've never had that," Victoria said quietly. "That certainty. About anything except business." "Why not?" The question cut deeper than he intended. Victoria felt it open something she'd kept locked for decades. "My father," she said finally. "He built Sterling Enterprises, made his first million by 30, his first 100 million by 40, and he did it alone. No partners, no collaborators, no one he trusted enough to share the weight." "That sounds lonely." "He called it strength, said emotions were liabilities, said love was a distraction successful people couldn't afford." She paused, feeling the old lessons rise up like bile. "He said those words to me on my 14th birthday. My mother had just left him for another man. He sat me down in his office and explained that everything I'd believed about family was weakness." Marcus absorbed this. That's a hell of a thing to tell a child. It was the truth, his truth anyway, and I made it mine. "You don't have to keep it." The words hit Victoria like a physical blow. So simple, so obvious, and yet she'd never let herself think them. "You don't have to keep it." There, midnight came and went. The storm reached its peak wind, shrieking against the lodge with terrifying intensity. The window rattled so violently that Marcus thought it might shatter. He pulled Victoria closer, no longer thinking about boundaries or propriety, only about survival. She didn't resist. Her shaking had gotten worse, her words starting to slur, warning signs he recognized from his army training. "Stay with me," he said firmly. "Keep talking." "About what?" "Anything. Tell me about your work. Tell me about your first job. Tell me what you wanted to be when you grew up." "A teacher," she whispered, surprising herself. "Before my father's lectures, before business school, I wanted to teach history." "Why history?" "Because it repeats. If you understand the past, you can predict the future." Her voice was fading. "My father said teaching was for people who couldn't succeed in the real world." "Your father was wrong about a lot of things." Victoria's eyes found his in the darkness. Something passed between them, recognition maybe, understanding. "Yeah," she breathed. "Maybe he was." Marcus pulled the blankets tighter around them both, pressing warmth into her back, her hands, her shoulders. He talked continuously through the worst of the night, telling her about Jalen's first steps, about the dinosaur phase that showed no signs of ending, about burnt pancakes and bedtime stories that ran too long. Normal things. Small things. The kind of life Victoria had dismissed as unremarkable. Now it sounded like everything she'd never known she was missing. The storm began to ease some time before dawn. Victoria's shivering had finally subsided, her body warmed by hours of shared heat and the blankets Marcus kept adjusting around her. She drifted in and out of consciousness, too exhausted to maintain her usual vigilance. At some point, her head found its way to his chest. At some point, his arm tightened around her shoulders. Neither of them acknowledged it, but neither pulled away. Marcus stayed awake, watching the window lighten, almost imperceptibly, gray dawn pushing through the frost. He thought about Maya, about whether she would have understood what was happening in this room. Not romance, this wasn't that, not yet, maybe never, but connection. The kind that forms when two people stop performing and start simply being. He thought Maya would have understood. She always had a gift for seeing past people's armor to what lay beneath. "You're still awake," Victoria murmured against his chest. "Someone had to keep watch." She lifted her head, meeting his eyes in the early light. For a long moment, neither spoke. "Thank you," she finally said, "for keeping me alive." "Just returning the favor. Your company's paid my bills for 3 years. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "That's not the same thing, and you know it." "No, it wasn't. But Marcus didn't know how to say what it actually was, and Victoria didn't know how to hear it. So they lay there in silence, watching the storm die, knowing that morning would bring rescue and reality, and all the complicated questions they weren't ready to answer. What happened in this room would change everything, and both of them knew it. The gray light filtering through the frost-covered window brought no comfort, only clarity. Victoria became aware of her position slowly, head still resting against Marcus's chest, his arms still secure around her shoulders, their bodies pressed together beneath layers of blankets that had meant the difference between life and death. She didn't move immediately. For one stolen moment, she allowed herself to simply exist in the warmth, in the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath her ear, in the profound quiet that had replaced the screaming wind. Then reality crashed back. Victoria pulled away sharply, sitting up so fast the room spun. Cold air rushed into the space between them, a brutal reminder of what the night had demanded. "I need to check my phone," she said, her voice hoarse. She couldn't look at him. Marcus sat up slowly, watching her scramble for her device with movements that seemed almost panicked. He understood. The night had stripped them both of armor they'd spent years constructing. Daylight meant decisions about what to do with that vulnerability. "Still no signal," Victoria muttered, jabbing at the screen. "This is ridiculous. We're not in the middle of nowhere." "We kind of are." She shot him a look that might have been intimidating 12 hours ago. Now it just looked tired. "The roads will be closed," Marcus said, standing and stretching muscles stiff from a night of vigilance. "Could be hours before rescue crews get this far up the mountain." "Hours?" Victoria's voice pitched higher. "I have a board meeting at 2. The Harrison deal needs my signature by. None of that matters right now." "Excuse me." Marcus turned to face her fully. In the pale morning light, she looked different than the polished CEO who'd climbed into his truck yesterday. Her hair was disheveled, makeup smeared, expensive blouse, wrinkled beyond repair. But it was her eyes that struck him. The carefully constructed walls hadn't fully rebuilt themselves yet, and he could still see the woman underneath. The one who'd whispered about wanting to be a teacher before her father's lessons erased that dream. "I said none of that matters. We're alive. Everything else is just details." Victoria opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. Something in his words, or maybe in his calm certainty, deflated the response before it could form. A knock at the door made them both jump. "Road crews are working on the highway," Howard's voice called through the wood. "Got coffee downstairs if you want it. Might be a few hours yet." Marcus moved toward the door, but Victoria's voice stopped him. "Marcus." He turned. She was standing by the window now, arms wrapped around herself in that defensive posture he was beginning to recognize. "What happened last night stays in this room, I know." He reached for the door handle. "You made that clear." "That's not what I was going to say." He paused, waiting. Victoria struggled with words that didn't come naturally to her. Gratitude, vulnerability, acknowledgement of debt. These weren't currencies she traded in. "You saved my life," she finally said. I don't have a template for this." "You don't need a template. You just need to come downstairs and drink some coffee." He opened the door. "Everything else can wait." He left her standing there, grappling with the unfamiliar sensation of not knowing what came next. The lodge's common area was warmer than their room had been, the wood-burning stove now crackling with fresh logs. The couple Howard had mentioned, a pair of hikers in their 30s, sat huddled together on a worn couch, sharing a blanket and speaking in low voices. They looked up when Marcus descended the stairs, offered tired smiles of solidarity. "Hell of a night," the man said. "Yeah." Marcus accepted the coffee Howard handed him, wrapping his hands around the warmth. "You two make it through okay?" "Barely. Sarah here wanted to keep hiking when the storm hit. Thought we could outrun it." The woman, Sarah, rolled her eyes. "I said we could reach the next shelter. That's different from outrunning. And I said you were crazy. Yet here we are, both alive. So maybe I'm not that crazy." Marcus smiled despite himself. The easy banter between them, the comfortable intimacy of two people who'd weathered storms together before, literal and otherwise, stirred something in his chest. He and Maya had been like that once, trading gentle insults that were really declarations of love, finishing each other's sentences without trying. God, he missed that. Victoria appeared at the bottom of the stairs, and the atmosphere shifted immediately. Even disheveled and exhausted, she carried an aura of authority that demanded attention. The hikers straightened unconsciously, the casual comfort of the room contracting around her presence. Howard handed her a coffee without being asked. Cream sugar. Black, thank you. She took a position near the window, separate from the group, watching the snow-covered landscape with an expression Marcus couldn't read. Your friend doesn't say much, Sarah observed quietly. She's not my friend, Marcus replied automatically. Then, hearing how that sounded, she's my boss. Oh. Sarah's eyebrows rose. That's interesting. Her husband nudged her. Don't. I'm not doing anything. I'm just saying it's interesting. 2 coworkers, 1 room, 1 bed, 1 crazy storm. She shrugged. Sounds like the setup to a Hallmark movie. Marcus didn't respond. Across the room, Victoria's shoulders had stiffened almost imperceptibly. She'd heard. The morning stretched on, measured in cups of coffee and fragments of awkward conversation. The hikers eventually returned to their room to pack, leaving Marcus and Victoria in a silence that felt different from the night before. That silence had been forced by exhaustion and fear. This one was chosen, 2 people deliberately not saying the things that needed to be said. Finally, Victoria spoke. Tell me about the Harrison Creek project. Work. Safe territory. Marcus accepted the deflection gratefully. We're behind because of the weather delays in November. Then the concrete supplier had issues. Then 2 of my best guys quit for a job in Denver that paid better. He shrugged. Construction's always 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. The site's solid, we'll catch up. The board doesn't care about catching up. They care about timelines. Then maybe the board should spend a winter building in the mountains. The words came out sharper than he intended. Victoria's eyes narrowed. Is that how you speak to all your supervisors? Only the ones who haven't checked in on their projects in 6 months. He held her gaze steadily. When's the last time you actually visited Harrison Creek? Before yesterday, I mean. I don't need to visit every site personally. That's what managers are for. No, you're right. Why would the CEO bother understanding what her employees actually do? The air between them crackled. This was familiar ground conflict challenge, the push and pull of power dynamics. Easier than whatever had passed between them in the dark. I built this company from nothing, Victoria said coldly. I understand more than you know. You built it from your father's seed money and his connections. I read the company history. How dare you? I'm not criticizing. I'm stating facts. There's a difference. Marcus set down his coffee cup. You're brilliant at what you do. Everyone knows that. But somewhere along the way you stopped seeing people as people. We're all just numbers on spreadsheets, resources to be managed. That's not fair. Isn't it? He leaned forward. You've been in my truck for hours. You know my name, my son's name, how my wife died. What do you know about any other employee who's been with you for 3 years? Hell, what do you know about Rebecca, your assistant? How long has she worked for you? Victoria opened her mouth to answer, then stopped. The truth was written on her face. She didn't know. 4 years, Marcus said quietly. She has a daughter with special needs. A husband who works nights, so one of them is always home. She takes the bus because they can't afford a second car, which is why she's always exactly 7 minutes early. She builds in buffer time for transit delays. How do you know all that? Because I asked. Because she's a person, not a resource. He stood, moving toward the window toward her. Last night you told me you wanted to be a teacher once, before your father convinced you that caring about people was weakness. Is this really who you wanted to become? The question hit Victoria like a physical blow. She felt it in her chest, a sharp, unexpected pain that had nothing to do with the cold. You don't know anything about what I wanted. I know you were shaking in my arms at 3 in the morning, and it wasn't just from the cold. I know you haven't let anyone close enough to matter in years, maybe decades. I know you're lonely in a way that all the money in the world can't fix. Stop. Why? Because it's true. Because you have no right. Victoria's voice cracked just slightly. You spent one night next to me, and suddenly you think you understand my entire life. You don't know what I've sacrificed, what I've built, what I've had to become to survive in rooms full of men who wanted me to fail. I'm not saying your sacrifices weren't real. I'm saying maybe some of them weren't necessary. They stood facing each other close enough to touch, neither moving. The anger between them was real, but so was something else. Something that had been building since the moment Victoria grabbed his jacket in the dark, seeking an anchor she didn't know she needed. My father died alone, Victoria said suddenly. The word seemed to surprise even her. 3 years ago. Massive heart attack in his office at 2 in the morning. Security found him the next day. He'd been dead for hours and no one even knew. Marcus said nothing, waiting. At the funeral, I looked around at all the people who came, business associates, competitors, politicians he'd donated to. Hundreds of people. And I realized not one of them was there because they loved him. They were there because they feared him, or owed him, or wanted something from his estate. She laughed bitterly. I gave the eulogy, talked about his vision, his legacy, his contribution to industry. I couldn't think of a single personal story to share, not one memory that was just human. I'm sorry. Don't be. He made his choices, and I made mine. She turned away from Marcus, facing the window again. The day after the funeral, I fired 3 executives who'd been embezzling from subsidiary accounts. I closed a hostile takeover that netted the company $400 million. I worked 18-hour days for the next month because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant feeling, and feeling meant falling apart. Yes. The admission hung between them. Marcus moved to stand beside her, close, but not touching, looking out at the same snow-covered landscape. Maya's funeral was in September, he said quietly. Beautiful day. Leaves just starting to change. Jalen wore a little suit we bought him at Target. He looked so grown up and so lost. He kept asking me when the party would be over and when Mommy would wake up. Victoria turned to look at him. That night, after everyone left, after my mother finally got Jalen to sleep, I sat in our bedroom, Maya's and mine, and I couldn't breathe. Everything smelled like her. Everything reminded me that she was gone, and she wasn't coming back, and I was supposed to raise our son alone. What did you do? I cleaned. For 6 hours, I cleaned that room until it didn't smell like her anymore. Packed her clothes, her books, her jewelry. Stripped the sheets. Scrubbed the floors. His voice stayed steady, but Victoria could hear the old pain beneath it. My mother found me at 4 in the morning, surrounded by boxes, crying so hard I couldn't stand up. Marcus. She didn't say anything. She just sat down next to me on the floor and held me. Let me fall apart. And when I was done, when there was nothing left, she said 5 words I've never forgotten. What were they? Now we rebuild, together. Victoria felt something shift in her chest. Not breaking, nothing so dramatic. More like a door opening, just a crack after years of being sealed shut. I don't have that, she whispered. I don't have someone to sit on the floor with me. You could. How I've spent 30 years pushing everyone away. The few people who tried to get close, I drove them off, tested them until they failed, then used the failure as proof that I was right not to trust anyone. That's a choice you can unmake. Can I? She shook her head. I'm 52 years old. I am who I am. Last night, when you were shaking in my arms, was that who you are? Or was that who you are when you stop pretending? The question cut too deep. Victoria turned away physically, moving back from the conversation, retreating toward safer ground. The roads will be clear soon. We should prepare. Marcus let her go. Pushing further wouldn't help, he'd learned that with Jalen. Sometimes people needed to retreat before they could advance. Sometimes the bravest thing you could do was wait. Howard appeared from the back room holding a radio. "Just got word highway's open. Should be safe to drive in about an hour." Victoria visibly straightened the CEO armor, reconstructing itself piece by piece. "Good. Excellent. Thank you for your hospitality." "Storm like that hospitality's just being human." Howard looked between them with knowing eyes. "You two going to be okay?" "Fine," Victoria said crisply. "We're fine." But she didn't look at Marcus when she said it. The drive down the mountain was nothing like the drive up. Clear skies, plowed roads, sunlight glittering off fresh snow. The world looked new, reborn, the kind of beauty that only follows destruction. Victoria spent the first hour on her phone reconnecting to the life she'd temporarily lost. Emails flooded in, hundreds of them, each demanding attention. Voicemails from board members, attorneys, assistants, panicking at her absence. The familiar chaos of running an empire. Marcus drove in silence, giving her space. But he watched her from the corner of his eye, saw how her shoulders tensed with each notification, how her jaw tightened at certain messages, how the soft woman from the night before disappeared beneath layers of responsibility and expectation. "Your board meeting," he said finally. "Are you going to make it?" Victoria looked up, surprised he'd remembered. "I'll have to reschedule. Push it to tomorrow." "Will that cause problems?" "Everything causes problems. That's what I pay people to solve." The coldness had returned to her voice. The walls were almost fully rebuilt. Marcus took a breath. Victoria. Her first name. He'd never used it before. She looked at him sharply. "What happens when we get back?" he asked. "What do you mean?" "I mean, do we pretend this didn't happen? Do I go back to being the site manager you don't recognize? Do you go back to being the CEO who sees people as spreadsheets?" "That's not, because I can do that if that's what you need. I've survived worse than awkward silences with my boss, but I don't think that's what you want." Victoria stared at him. The directness, the absolute refusal to play games was so different from every interaction she was used to. Board members who spoke in euphemisms, lawyers who buried meaning in jargon, competitors who smiled while reaching for knives. "What I want doesn't matter. That's bullshit and you know it." "Excuse me. You're the CEO. You own 43% of the company. You set policy, you make decisions, you shape the entire culture of Sterling Enterprises. If you want something different, you can make something different. The only question is whether you have the courage. You don't get to lecture me about courage." "Why not?" "Because I change my own oil, and you have people for that. Because my bank account has fewer zeros than yours." Marcus shook his head. "That's not courage. That's insulation. Real courage is what you showed last night, admitting you were scared, admitting you were lonely, letting someone see you without the armor. That was survival, not courage." "Same thing sometimes." They drove in silence for several miles. The city began to appear in the distance, towers of glass and steel rising from the valley floor. "I don't know how to be different," Victoria said quietly. "I've been this way so long." "You don't have to figure it out today. You just have to decide if you want to try." She thought about that. About Rebecca and her daughter and her carefully calculated bus schedule. About the employees she'd never bothered to know. About her father dying alone in an empty office, surrounded by the empire he'd built and the humans he'd alienated. "Jalen," she said suddenly. "Tell me more about him." The request surprised Marcus, but he answered. "He's in second grade. His teacher says he talks too much, but I think that's because he's got more ideas than he knows what to do with. He wants to be a paleontologist, or a firefighter, changes every week. His favorite food is peanut butter sandwiches with the crusts cut off, and he still sleeps with a stuffed dinosaur named Rex, even though he claims he's too old for toys." Victoria listened. Really listened. Not for information she could use, not for weaknesses to exploit, but simply because she wanted to understand. He sounds wonderful. He's the best thing that ever happened to me. The best thing that ever will. Marcus glanced at her. Maya used to say that love isn't something you feel, it's something you do. Every day in small ways you choose it. Jalen taught me what she meant. I don't know if I'm capable of that kind of love. Everyone's capable. Some people just forget how. The city rose around them now, traffic and noise, and the familiar rhythm of urban life. The storm might as well have happened in another world. Marcus pulled into the Sterling Enterprises parking garage, the same spot they'd left from yesterday. Was it really only yesterday? It felt like years. He stopped the truck, but didn't kill the engine. What now? Victoria sat still for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was different, uncertain in a way he'd never heard from her. I have to go. Meetings, damage control, the things that never stop. I know. But Marcus. She turned to face him fully, and he saw the woman from the night before, not the CEO, not the Ice Queen, but the vulnerable human who'd shivered in his arms and whispered about dreams she'd abandoned. Thank you. For everything. For keeping me alive, for making me think, for... She struggled with words that didn't come naturally. For seeing me. The real me. I don't think anyone has done that in a very long time. Any time. She reached out and touched his hand, just for a moment, just a brush of fingers against his. Then she opened the door and stepped out into the garage, into the life that demanded she be someone she wasn't sure she wanted to be anymore. Marcus watched her walk toward the elevator heels, clicking on concrete posture, straightening with each step. The armor was going back on, piece by piece. But just before she reached the doors, she stopped, turned, looked back at him, and smiled. Not the practiced smile she deployed in boardrooms and press conferences. A real one, small and uncertain and absolutely human. Then she was gone. Marcus sat alone in the truck engine still running, thinking about storms and survival and the strange alchemy that transforms strangers into something more. His phone buzzed. A photo from his mother Jalen holding up a crayon drawing. A stick figure man next to a stick figure dinosaur, both smiling with giant circular heads. Daddy, come home. The caption read, We made you a picture. Marcus smiled, put the truck in gear, and drove toward the only thing that had ever truly mattered. But something had shifted inside him. A door that had been closed since Maya's death had cracked open, letting in light he'd forgotten existed. He didn't know what would happen next. He didn't know if Victoria would retreat behind her walls or try to change. He didn't know if one night in a mountain storm meant anything beyond survival. But for the first time in 3 years, Marcus Thompson allowed himself to wonder about the future. And that maybe was the beginning of everything. 3 weeks passed before Victoria allowed herself to think about that night again. She buried herself in work with a ferocity that alarmed even her most loyal staff. 18-hour days became 20-hour days. Board meetings stacked on top of investor calls, stacked on top of acquisition negotiations. Rebecca started leaving protein bars on her desk because Victoria forgot to eat. The machine of Sterling Enterprises consumed her completely, and she let it, because stopping meant remembering, and remembering meant feeling things she wasn't ready to feel. But the changes came anyway, small and uninvited. She noticed Rebecca one morning, really noticed her struggling through the door with an armful of files while balancing coffee and her phone. Victoria stood, walked over, and took the files from her hands. Rebecca froze. In 4 years, Victoria Sterling had never done anything like that. Thank you, Rebecca managed. How's your daughter? Victoria asked. The question landed like a grenade. Rebecca's face cycled through confusion, suspicion, and finally cautious hope. She's good. Started a new therapy program last month. Early signs are positive. Good, that's good. Victoria returned to her desk, unsure what else to say, aware that she'd crossed some invisible line, and not entirely sure how she felt about it. But she kept crossing it, small moments scattered through her days. Asking a junior analyst about his weekend. Remembering a project manager's name without checking her notes. Arriving at meetings on time instead of strategically late. None of it felt natural. It was like wearing clothes that didn't quite fit, but she kept trying anyway. Her board members noticed. "You seem different lately," Charles Whitmore said after a particularly civil negotiation. Charles was 73, old money, old attitudes. He'd opposed Victoria's appointment as CEO 8 years ago and had been waiting for her to fail ever since. "Softer." Victoria's spine stiffened. "Is that a problem?" "Not a problem, just an observation." He smiled in that patronizing way she'd learned to despise. "Some might say it's about time you showed your feminine side. And some might say you should retire before you embarrass yourself further." The words came out before she could stop them. Charles's smile vanished. "Careful, Victoria. Softness can be weaponized against you. So can incompetence. We all have our vulnerabilities." She walked away before he could respond, heart pounding, with something that felt dangerously close to satisfaction. The old Victoria would have smiled politely, filed away the insult, and found a way to undermine Charles quietly over months of strategic maneuvering. This Victoria didn't have patience for games anymore. She wasn't sure if that was growth or recklessness. Meanwhile, Marcus Thompson went back to his life as if nothing had happened. He picked up Jalen from school, made dinner, helped with homework, read bedtime stories that always ran too long because Jalen kept asking questions. He went to work, managed the Harrison Creek project, attended meetings where Victoria's name was mentioned, but her presence was never felt. He did everything exactly as he'd done it before. Except he couldn't stop thinking about her. It wasn't romantic, not exactly. It was more like a splinter lodged under his skin, impossible to ignore. He thought about the way she'd trembled in his arms, about the raw confession of her loneliness, about the smile she'd given him in the parking garage before the elevator doors closed. He thought about Maya, too. Wondered what she would say about all of this. "You're distracted," his mother observed one evening, watching him burn the grilled cheese he was making for Jalen's dinner. "I'm fine." "Boy, I've known you for 47 years. You're not fine." Marcus scraped the blackened sandwich into the trash and started over. "Just tired. Work stuff." "Work stuff." His mother's voice dripped with skepticism. "That why you've been staring at your phone every 5 minutes like you're expecting a call from the president? I don't do that." "Daddy does do that." Jalen chimed in helpfully from the kitchen table where he was supposed to be doing math homework. "He looks at his phone and then he makes a face like this." The boy scrunched up his features in an exaggerated expression of confusion and longing. Marcus's mother laughed. "See, even the child notices. Both of you need to mind your business. Your business is my business. That's what family means." His mother moved closer, lowering her voice so Jalen wouldn't hear. "What happened on that mountain, Marcus? You came back different." "Nothing happened. We got stuck in the storm. We survived. End of story." "If it was the end, you wouldn't be burning grilled cheese and checking your phone like a teenager with a crush." "I don't have a crush. She's my boss." "She's a person. A person you spent a night with under extreme circumstances. That creates bonds whether you want them or not." Marcus turned to face his mother fully. Dorothy Thompson was 69 years old, had raised 4 children mostly alone after his father's death, and had more wisdom in her little finger than most people accumulated in a lifetime. She also had an annoying habit of being right about everything. "It's complicated," he admitted. "Love usually is." "Who said anything about love?" Dorothy just smiled and patted his cheek. "Make the boy his sandwich. We can talk more when little ears aren't listening." But they didn't talk more. Marcus wasn't ready, and Dorothy was patient. She'd waited 3 years for him to start healing after Maya's death. She could wait a little longer for him to figure out what came next. The first real contact came unexpectedly 6 weeks after the storm. Marcus was reviewing blueprints in his office, a cramped space in a construction trailer at the Harrison Creek site, when his phone buzzed with an unknown number. "Thompson? It's Victoria." His heart did something complicated in his chest. "Ms. Sterling, how can I help you?" A pause. "I called your personal phone. You don't have to be formal." Force of habit. Another pause, longer this time. He could hear her breathing, could almost see her pacing in whatever glass-walled office she was occupying. "I wanted to ask you something," she finally said. "Go ahead." "How do you do it?" "Do what?" "The balance. Work-family, being present for both. I've been trying to. I've been making changes, and I don't know if I'm doing it right. I don't know if there is a right." Marcus leaned back in his chair, surprised by the vulnerability in her voice. The Victoria Sterling he'd known before the storm would never have admitted uncertainty to anyone, let alone an employee. "There's no right way," he said slowly. "There's just the way you choose, and the consequences you accept." "That's not helpful." "It's honest. You want helpful, hire a consultant." She laughed, actually laughed, and the sound caught him off guard. He'd never heard her laugh before. It was lower than he expected, almost rusty, like a door that hadn't been opened in years. "I'm serious, Marcus. I'm trying to be different, and everyone around me is looking at me like I've grown a second head. My board thinks I've gone soft. My staff doesn't trust the changes. Half of them are waiting for the other shoe to drop. Give it time." "I don't have time. There's a hostile takeover attempt in the works. Whitmore's been talking to outside investors, building a coalition to push me out. If I show weakness now..." "Being human isn't weakness. In my world it is." Marcus was quiet for a moment, thinking about Maya, about what she used to say when he came home frustrated from jobs where no one appreciated his work. "My wife used to tell me something," he said. "She said that people can tell the difference between performance and truth. You can fake competence, fake confidence, fake pretty much anything. But you can't fake caring. People feel it when it's real, and they feel it when it's not." "What's your point?" "My point is that maybe your board doesn't trust the changes because they're not sure if you mean them. They're waiting to see if this is real or if it's just another strategy." "And how do I prove it's real?" "You keep showing up. Day after day, you keep making the choices that reflect who you want to be instead of who they expect you to be. Eventually, the evidence becomes undeniable." Victoria was silent for so long that Marcus thought the call might have dropped. "Victoria, I'm here." Her voice was thick with something he couldn't identify. "Thank you. I didn't know who else to call." "Anytime." "Marcus." She hesitated. "I'd like to see the Harrison Creek site. Properly this time. Not as an inspection. Just to understand what you do, how it works. Would that be appropriate?" "You're the CEO. You can do whatever you want." "That's not what I'm asking." He understood then. She wasn't asking for permission as his boss. She was asking for permission as something else, something neither of them had words for yet. "I'd like that," he said. "Jalen has a school event next Friday, so I'll be out early. But any other day works." "Wednesday. I'll come Wednesday." "I'll be here." The call ended, but Marcus sat holding the phone for a long time afterward, staring at the blueprints he could no longer focus on. Dorothy was right. Something had started on that mountain, and it wasn't going to stop just because they wanted it to. Victoria arrived at Harrison Creek at 8 in the morning, driving herself for the first time in years. She'd left her usual armor at home, no power suits, no designer heels. Just jeans, boots, and a practical jacket she'd dug out of the back of her closet. Marcus met her at the site entrance, hard hat in hand. "You'll need this." She took it, fingers brushing his briefly. Neither acknowledged the contact. "So, this is what my money builds," she said, looking around at the skeletal structure rising from the frozen ground. "This is what your money and my team's sweat builds. The money's just potential. The work is what makes it real. He walked her through the site, explaining each phase of construction, introducing her to crew members by name. Victoria found herself paying attention in a way she never had before, not just to the logistics and timelines, but to the people. The electrician whose wife had just had twins. The crane operator who was putting his daughter through college. The apprentice carpenter who'd done time for robbery and was rebuilding his life one nail at a time. "You know all of them," she said quietly, after Marcus had finished a conversation with an older worker about his upcoming knee surgery. "They're my people. That's my job. I have 300 employees. I couldn't name a quarter of them. So start learning." It sounded simple when he said it. Everything did. But Victoria was beginning to understand that simple wasn't the same as easy. They ended up in his office trailer, warming up with bad coffee, and continuing conversations that felt increasingly dangerous. "Can I ask you something personal?" Victoria said. "You can ask. I might not answer." "After Maya died, how long before you felt normal again?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "Define normal." "Like yourself. Like the person you were before." "I'm not that person anymore. I never will be." He saw her face fall and softened his words. "That's not a bad thing. Grief changes you. It has to. The person I was before Maya died didn't know what real loss felt like. The person I am now does. I'm not better or worse, I'm just different. I haven't lost anyone I loved, not really. My father and I weren't close. My mother left when I was 12. I've kept everyone at such a distance that losing them wouldn't even hurt." "Is that what you wanted?" "I thought it was. I thought it was smart. Now I'm not sure." "What changed?" Victoria looked at him, then really looked, and Marcus felt the weight of everything unspoken between them. "You did," she said quietly. "That night when I was shaking, and you just held me. No judgment. No expectation. Just presence. I haven't experienced that since I was a child. Maybe not even then." Marcus didn't know what to say. The conversation had drifted into territory he wasn't prepared to navigate. "I should go," Victoria said, abruptly standing. "I have a conference call at noon." "Victoria, thank you for the tour. It was enlightening." She was already moving toward the door, reconstructing walls as fast as he could see them. "Wait." She stopped but didn't turn around. "Friday night," Marcus said. "After Jalen's school thing. We're getting pizza. Just me, him, and my mother. It's nothing fancy, but if you wanted to come." Victoria turned slowly. "Are you inviting me to meet your family?" "I'm inviting you to eat pizza with people who don't care about quarterly earnings or market shares. People who judge you based on whether you laugh at bad jokes and eat your crusts." "I don't eat crusts." "That's a strike against you already." She almost smiled. "I'll think about it." It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. Marcus watched her drive away, wondering what the hell he was doing. 3 years he'd kept the world at arm's length. 3 years he'd convinced himself that he didn't need anything beyond Jalen and work, and the careful routine of survival. Now here he was, inviting Victoria Sterling into that protected space, risking the stability he'd fought so hard to build. Maya's voice echoed in his memory. "Love isn't something you feel, it's something you do." But was this love? Or was it just two broken people recognizing each other's damage? He didn't know. Maybe that was the point. Maybe certainty was the enemy of connection. Friday came faster than either of them expected. Victoria spent the week oscillating between determination and terror. She bought and returned 3 different outfits, unable to decide what one wore to pizza with a 7-year-old and his grandmother. She rehearsed conversations in her head, imagined worst-case scenarios, considered canceling 100 times. But she didn't cancel. At 6 p.m., she stood outside Marcus's apartment building, heart pounding like she was about to walk into the most important meeting of her life. Which maybe she was. Marcus answered on the first knock. You came. I said I'd think about it. I thought about it. Behind him, chaos erupted. A small figure burst between Marcus's legs, staring up at Victoria with enormous brown eyes and a chocolate-stained mouth. Are you the lady from the storm? Victoria blinked. Yes, I suppose I am. Daddy said you got really cold, and he had to keep you warm like a human blanket. Jalen grinned, revealing a gap where his front tooth should have been. That's silly. People can't be blankets. Jalen, Marcus warned. What you did say that... Victoria felt something crack open in her chest. The child's unfiltered honesty, his complete lack of pretense, it was disarming in a way she couldn't have anticipated. Your father's right, she said, crouching down to Jalen's level. I was very cold, and he was very warm. He saved my life. Daddy's good at saving people. He's like a superhero, but without the cape. Jalen leaned closer conspiratorially. I think he should get a cape, don't you? I think that's an excellent idea. See, Dad? She agrees with me. Marcus shook his head, but he was smiling. Victoria, this is my son, the person with no filter. And somewhere behind him is my mother, who I'm sure is... right here. Dorothy Thompson appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Her eyes took in Victoria with sharp assessment, measuring, weighing, deciding. So you're the CEO. I am, and you must be Mrs. Thompson. Dorothy. Nobody calls me Mrs. Thompson except telemarketers and police officers. She extended a hand. Come in, pizza's getting cold. The apartment was small but warm, filled with evidence of lives being lived. Jalen's drawings taped to the refrigerator, Maya's photo on the bookshelf, worn furniture that had clearly seen years of use. Victoria felt out of place immediately. Too polished, too careful, too aware of her own foreignness in this space. But Jalen took her hand and pulled her toward the kitchen table, chattering about his school play and the dinosaur costume his grandmother was making and the best pizza toppings in objective scientific order. Pepperoni is number one, he declared. Then cheese. Then mushrooms. But only if you're weird like Daddy. I like mushrooms, Victoria said. Jalen's eyes went wide. You're weird too. Apparently. The boy considered this seriously. That's okay. Daddy says being weird is just being yourself out loud. And that's a good thing. Victoria looked at Marcus across the table. Your father sounds very wise. He's okay. Jalen shrugged. For a human blanket. Dinner was nothing like Victoria expected. There were no formal place settings, no careful conversation topics, no hidden agendas. Just pizza and laughter and Jalen's endless questions and Dorothy's dry observations and Marcus quietly watching it all with an expression Victoria couldn't read. She found herself relaxing despite her nerves. Found herself laughing at Jalen's jokes, engaging with Dorothy's pointed questions about work-life balance, eating pizza with her hands like she hadn't done since college. You're different than I expected, Dorothy said during a quiet moment when Jalen had run off to find his dinosaur collection. Different how? Warmer. Marcus said you were like ice, but ice doesn't look at my grandson the way you do. How do I look at him? Like you're seeing something you forgot existed. Dorothy leaned forward. My son has been walking around half alive for 3 years, surviving but not living, going through motions because that's all he knew how to do. Then he spends one night stuck on a mountain with you, and suddenly he's burning grilled cheese because he's too distracted to pay attention. I don't think I can take credit for that. I'm not asking you to take credit. I'm asking you to be careful. Dorothy's eyes hardened slightly. He has a child. He has a heart that's been broken once already. If you're not serious about this, whatever this is, walk away now, before anyone gets hurt. Victoria felt the words land heavily. I don't know what this is. I don't know what I want. That's honest, at least. Dorothy sat back. Just figure it out before someone gets attached. Because I guarantee you my grandson is already halfway there. As if summoned, Jalen burst back into the room, arms full of plastic dinosaurs. Look, I want to show you Rex. He's my favorite, and he sleeps with me every night, even though I'm too old for stuffed animals, because some rules are meant to be broken. He climbed onto the chair next to Victoria and began arranging dinosaurs on the table, explaining each one's name and personality with absolute seriousness. Victoria listened, really listened, and felt something shift inside her that she didn't have words for yet. Later, after Jalen had been tucked into bed, and Dorothy had retired with pointed comments about adults needing time to talk, Marcus and Victoria stood on the small balcony overlooking the city. "Your mother warned me," Victoria said, "about what? Being careful with you, with Jalen, not starting something I'm not prepared to finish." Marcus nodded slowly. "What did you tell her?" "The truth. That I don't know what I want. That I've spent my whole life avoiding exactly this kind of situation." She turned to face him. "But I also can't stop thinking about that night, about you, about what it felt like to be held by someone who expected nothing in return." "Victoria, I'm not good at this. I'm not good at feelings or vulnerability or opening up. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to retreat behind walls because that's what I've always done. I'm going to hurt you without meaning to." "I know. And you're still standing here." Marcus stepped closer, close enough that she could feel his warmth, even in the cold night air. "Maya taught me that love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone whose imperfections you can live with, whose struggles you want to help carry." That's a lot to ask of someone. It's everything to ask. But that's what makes it worth it. They stood in silence, the city lights spreading beneath them like scattered stars. Victoria made a decision. Not the kind she made in boardrooms, calculated and strategic. This one came from somewhere deeper, somewhere she'd tried to bury for decades. She reached for his hand. Marcus looked down at their intertwined fingers, then back at her face. Neither spoke. Neither needed to. The night stretched around them, full of uncertainty and possibility. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The weeks that followed that night on the balcony moved with a rhythm Victoria had never known before. She found herself carving out time she'd always claimed didn't exist. Saturday mornings at the park, watching Jalen chase pigeons. Wednesday dinners at Marcus's apartment where Dorothy's cooking filled the small space with warmth and the smell of collard greens. Sunday phone calls that started as quick check-ins and stretched into hours of conversation about everything and nothing. She learned the texture of Marcus's laugh, the way it started low in his chest before reaching his eyes. She memorized Jalen's dinosaur facts, which changed weekly as his obsessions evolved. She discovered that Dorothy Thompson had opinions about everything from politics to pie crusts, and expressed them with a directness that would have intimidated Victoria's board members. And slowly, terrifyingly, she began to feel like she belonged somewhere. But the world outside didn't pause for her transformation. Sterling Enterprises demanded its pound of flesh, and Charles Whitmore had been sharpening his knives. "The vote is scheduled for next month," Rebecca said, sliding a folder across Victoria's desk. "Whitmore's coalition has secured commitments from 6 board members. That's enough to call an emergency session." Victoria opened the folder, scanning the names. People she'd worked with for years, people who'd smiled at her across conference tables and toasted her successes at company galas. Now they were lining up to push her out. What's their angle? Performance concerns. They're claiming the company has lost direction under your leadership. Pointing to the Harrison Creek delays, the softening of the management style, Rebecca hesitated. "The what?" "The rumors about your personal life." Victoria's blood ran cold. "What rumors?" "Nothing specific. Just whispers about you being distracted, spending time outside the office, being seen with—" Rebecca trailed off, clearly uncomfortable. "With who?" "A construction worker. That's how they're framing it." Victoria closed her eyes. Of course. In her world, everything became a weapon, even happiness. "Who's spreading this?" "I don't know, but it's coming from inside the company. Someone on the board, maybe. or someone close to them. Victoria dismissed Rebecca and sat alone in her office, staring at the city skyline she'd spent decades conquering. The empire she'd built, the power she'd accumulated, the success that was supposed to mean something, all of it threatened by the simple act of letting someone into her life. Her first instinct was to retreat, end things with Marcus before they became more ammunition, return to the Ice Queen persona that had protected her for so long. Fight the battle on terms she understood. But then she thought about Jalen's gap-toothed smile, about Dorothy's fierce protectiveness, about Marcus's hand in hers on that cold balcony, warm and steady, and asking nothing except honesty. She thought about her father dying alone in an office just like this one. Victoria picked up her phone and dialed. "Marcus, we need to talk." They met at a coffee shop far from Sterling Enterprises, far from the construction sites, far from anywhere they might be recognized. Victoria arrived first, choosing a corner table where she could watch the door. Marcus walked in 10 minutes later, still wearing his work boots and dusty jacket. He looked out of place among the laptop professionals and yoga pants crowds, and somehow more real than any of them. "You sounded serious on the phone," he said, sliding into the seat across from her. "I am serious. Is this where you tell me it was fun, but now it's over?" The directness caught her off guard. "Is that what you're expecting?" "I'm expecting whatever you need to do. I've been expecting it since the beginning." His voice held no accusation, only resignation. "I know how your world works, Victoria. I've always known I don't fit in it." "That's not—" She stopped, started again. "There's a board coup happening. Whitmore is trying to push me out, and part of their ammunition is us. Someone has been spreading rumors about me being distracted by a relationship with a construction worker." Marcus's jaw tightened. "They said that, they implied it. In my world, implication is enough." "So what do you want to do?" Victoria looked at him across the small table, at the man who had held her through the longest night of her life, who had invited her into his family without condition, who had shown her what connection could feel like when it was built on truth instead of transaction. "I want to fight," she said, "but I need you to understand what that means." "Tell me." "It means they'll dig into your life, your past. They'll find whatever they can use against you, against us. It means Jalen might hear things at school, rumors that filter down from parents who read business news. It means your mother will probably get calls from reporters looking for dirt. You think I care about that? You should. This is going to get ugly, Marcus. I've seen what happens when powerful people feel threatened. They don't fight fair. They destroy everything they can reach." Marcus leaned forward, his dark eyes locked on hers. "Victoria, I spent 20 years in construction. I've been passed over for promotions because of my skin color, had my work credited to white supervisors, listened to jokes about my wife when she was dying because some people are trash and trash doesn't improve. I've been audited by the IRS twice because I bought a house in a nice neighborhood and someone didn't think I belonged there. My son has already asked me why some kids' parents won't let them play with him." Victoria felt the weight of his words settle in her chest. "So don't tell me about ugly," Marcus continued. "I know ugly. What I want to know is whether you're ready to stop hiding, whether this is real enough to be worth the cost." "I don't know if I'm worth the cost. That's what I'm trying to tell you." "That's not your decision to make." "Of course it is. I'm the one bringing the chaos into your life." Marcus reached across the table and took her hand. "You're the one who made me feel alive again after 3 years of just surviving. You're the one who showed my son that strong women can also be kind. You're the one my mother actually likes, which is basically a miracle because that woman doesn't like anyone." Victoria laughed despite herself. "She threatened me, you know, that first dinner. Told me to figure out what I wanted before anyone got attached. That's her version of approval. If she didn't like you, she would have just been polite. Your family has a strange definition of approval. We have a real definition. That's different from strange." They sat in silence for a moment, hands still intertwined on the scarred wooden table. If we do this, Victoria said slowly, if we go public, if we fight this together, there's no going back. My board will use every weapon they have. Your life will become public property. Jalen will be affected whether we want him to be or not. I know. And you're still willing? Marcus squeezed her hand. Ask me what I'm not willing to do. What? I'm not willing to watch you walk away because you're scared. I'm not willing to let some old white men in suits decide that I'm not good enough to be with you. I'm not willing to teach my son that love is something you abandon when it gets difficult. He paused. Maya wouldn't have been willing either. She'd have told me I was crazy to even consider giving you up. You talk about her like she'd approve of this. She would. She always said I needed someone who could challenge me, push back when I got stubborn, see through my bullshit. She'd have liked you. Victoria felt tears prick at her eyes, an unfamiliar sensation. She couldn't remember the last time she'd cried about anything. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to have someone in my corner. You learn. Same way you learned everything else. One day at a time. The board meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday. Victoria spent the weekend preparing, but not in the way she would have 3 months ago. Instead of holing up alone in her office, she worked from Marcus's apartment laptop, balanced on her knees while Jalen played dinosaurs at her feet, and Dorothy supplied a steady stream of coffee and commentary. Whitmore sounds like the kind of man who peaked in high school and never got over it, Dorothy observed, reading over Victoria's shoulder. He inherited his position, third-generation wealth, fourth-generation entitlement. So he's never actually earned anything. Not unless you count being born into the right family. Dorothy snorted. My grandmother was born into slavery. Her daughter cleaned houses for white families. Her daughter, my mother, worked 3 jobs to put herself through nursing school. I raised 4 children on a teacher's salary after my husband died. She looked at Victoria with sharp eyes. That man doesn't know the first thing about earning. No, Victoria agreed quietly. He doesn't. Jalen looked up from his dinosaurs. Grammy, why are you angry? I'm not angry, baby. I'm just talking about people who don't understand what hard work means. Like the kids at school who cheat on tests. Exactly like that. Except these cheaters wear suits and think they're better than everyone else. Jalen considered this seriously. Victoria, are you going to beat the cheaters? Victoria looked at the boy's earnest face, at his complete faith that right would triumph over wrong. I'm going to try. Daddy says trying is what matters, not winning. Your daddy is very wise. I know. Jalen returned to his dinosaurs. That's why I keep him around. Marcus came home an hour later bringing pizza and the particular exhaustion of a long day on a construction site. He kissed Dorothy's cheek, ruffled Jalen's hair, and then stopped in front of Victoria, taking in the papers spread around her and the tension in her shoulders. How bad? They've got the votes, unless I can flip at least 2 board members in the next 3 days. Can you? I don't know. Whitmore's offering them something I can't, a return to the old ways. Comfortable, familiar, no surprises. I'm asking them to trust in change, and people don't trust change. Marcus sat down beside her. What about the other board members, the ones who haven't committed either way? There are 4. 2 are genuinely undecided. 2 are probably leaning against me, but haven't said so publicly. What would it take to convince them? Victoria rubbed her temples. Proof that my approach works. Numbers, data, something concrete. But the Harrison Creek numbers won't be finalized until next quarter. What about testimonials? People who've seen the changes firsthand. My board doesn't care about feelings, they care about returns. So make the feelings about returns. Marcus leaned forward, the problem solver in him engaging. Think about it. You've been changing how you manage people. Rebecca is more efficient because she's not terrified anymore. Your team actually volunteers information instead of hiding problems until they explode. How much money does that save? Victoria looked at him, wheels turning. That's actually a good point. Fear-based management looks efficient, but it creates hidden costs. turnover mistakes that get buried instead of fixed innovation that never happens because people are afraid to take risks. So show them that. Make the case that the soft approach is actually the smart approach. I'd need data, examples, time to compile it all. You have 3 days and a team of people who'd walk through fire for you. Use them. Victoria pulled out her phone. Rebecca, I need you to do something, and I need you to be honest with me. Completely honest. Can you do that? 3 days later, Victoria stood in the Sterling Enterprises boardroom, facing the people who would decide her fate. Whitmore sat at the far end of the table, flanked by his allies, wearing the satisfied expression of a man who believed victory was already assured. The undecided members scattered between them, faces carefully neutral. Before we proceed with the vote, Victoria said, I'd like to present some information. This isn't the time for presentations, Whitmore interrupted. The agenda is clear. The agenda includes discussion before voting. I'm discussing. She pulled up her laptop, projecting data onto the wall screen. 6 months ago, Sterling Enterprises had a turnover rate of 23%. We lost 2 senior project managers, 4 analysts, and countless junior staff to competitors who offered less money but better working conditions. Personnel issues cost this company $4.2 million last year in recruitment and training alone. That doesn't count the institutional knowledge that walked out the door or the projects that stalled because we couldn't retain experienced staff. The undecided board members leaned forward slightly. Numbers got their attention. In the past 3 months since I began implementing what Mr. Whitmore calls a soft management approach, turnover has dropped to 6%. We've had 0 senior departures. 3 former employees have asked to return. Project completion rates are up 11%. Those numbers don't prove I'm not finished. Victoria's voice carried the steel she'd spent decades sharpening. I also surveyed our department heads anonymously, asked them to compare their productivity under the old approach versus the new. Want to know what they said? She clicked to the next slide. Quotes filled the screen. My team actually tells me about problems before they become crises. I'm not spending half my day putting out fires that should have been reported weeks ago. For the first time in 5 years, I'm not looking for another job. Victoria turned to face Whitmore directly. This soft approach has saved this company money, retained talent, and improved outcomes across every measurable metric. If you'd prefer to return to management by intimidation, I suggest you explain to the shareholders why that's a better investment strategy. Whitmore's face had gone red. This is a distraction from the real issue, your personal conduct. My personal conduct is none of your concern. When it affects your judgment, my judgment built this company into what it is today. My judgment turned a regional construction firm into a national corporation. My judgment has delivered returns that outperform our competitors by an average of 8% annually. Victoria stepped toward him. What has your judgment delivered, Charles? Besides complaints about my leadership from the safety of golf courses and country clubs. You're emotional. This is exactly what I'm talking about. No, I'm direct. There's a difference. Would you like me to explain it slowly? A laugh broke the tension. Margaret Chen, one of the undecided members, was smiling. I think we've heard enough. Charles, your coalition has been suggesting that Victoria's recent changes indicate weakness or distraction. Based on what I've seen today, the opposite appears to be true. She's manipulating the data. She's presenting evidence. That's what good leaders do. Margaret looked around the table. I'm changing my vote. I support Victoria's continued leadership. 2 hours later, the coup was dead. The vote had fallen decisively in Victoria's favor, 8-4, with even some of Whitmore's former allies switching sides. Charles left the boardroom without speaking, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. Victoria remained at the table after everyone else had gone, staring at the empty seats, processing what had just happened. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Well, she typed back, we won. The response came immediately. Never doubted it. Jalen says congratulations and also wants to know if you'll come to his school play next week. Victoria laughed, a sound that echoed strangely in the empty boardroom. 3 months ago, she would have worked through the night celebrating by planning the next battle. Now all she wanted was to go somewhere warm and be with people who saw her as more than a title. Tell him I wouldn't miss it. She gathered her things and headed for the elevator, nodding at the security guard who held the door. Outside, the evening air was cool, the city humming with the energy of a million lives being lived. Her car was waiting, but Victoria waved it off. She wanted to walk, wanted to feel the ground under her feet, the wind on her face, the reality of a world that had somehow become bigger than balance sheets and board votes. Her phone rang. Rebecca. Ms. Sterling, the press is calling about the board meeting. They want a statement. Tell them I'm unavailable tonight. But, Rebecca, I just want to fight for my company. Tomorrow I'll be the CEO again. Tonight I'm going to eat dinner with my... She stopped, the word catching in her throat. With my family. Silence on the other end. Then softly. Congratulations, Victoria. Not just on the vote. Thank you, Rebecca. Go home to your daughter. We'll handle the press tomorrow. She hung up and kept walking, the city lights spreading before her like scattered stars. Something had changed. Not just in the boardroom, but in her. The walls she'd spent a lifetime building hadn't crumbled. That would take more than 3 months, but doors had appeared in them. Doors she could choose to open. Her phone buzzed again. A photo this time. Jalen in his school play costume, a bright green dinosaur suit that appeared to be mostly duct tape and ambition, giving a thumbs up to the camera. Behind him, Marcus was laughing. Behind Marcus, Dorothy was rolling her eyes. Victoria saved the photo. Then she hailed a cab and gave the driver Marcus's address. The battle was won, but the real victory was knowing exactly where she wanted to be when the fighting stopped. She arrived at the apartment to find Jalen still in his dinosaur costume, refusing to take it off, despite Dorothy's protests that dinner was ready and costumes were for stages, not tables. Victoria. The boy launched himself at her legs, nearly knocking her over. Daddy said you beat the cheaters. Did you really? I really did. Did you use your dinosaur powers? Something like that. Marcus appeared in the kitchen doorway, dish towel over his shoulder, smile spreading across his face. The conquering hero returns. I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who refused to lose. Same thing sometimes. Dorothy emerged behind him, already pulling an extra plate from the cabinet. You look like you could use a real meal. Sit, eat, tell us everything. So Victoria sat. She ate. She told them about the confrontation with Whitmore, the numbers she'd presented, Margaret Chen's decisive intervention. She watched Jalen's eyes go wide at the dramatic parts and heard Dorothy's satisfied humming when the villain was defeated. And somewhere in the middle of it all, surrounded by people who cared about her regardless of how the vote had gone, Victoria realized that she wasn't just telling a story about winning a battle. She was telling a story about finding her way home. Marcus caught her eye across the table, and she saw in his expression the same understanding that was settling in her own heart. The storm had brought them together. The aftermath had tested them. But this ordinary evening of bad jokes and good food and a 7-year-old who refused to remove his dinosaur costume, this was what they had built from the wreckage. And it was worth everything she'd risked to get here. 1 year changed everything and nothing at all. Victoria still ran Sterling Enterprises with the precision that had made her legendary. She still demanded excellence, still held her teams accountable, still closed deals that made competitors wonder what they were doing wrong. But the fear that had once surrounded her had transformed into something else, respect built on trust rather than intimidation. Rebecca had been promoted to chief of staff. The junior analyst Victoria had asked about his weekend was now leading a major project. The company's turnover rate had dropped to 4%, the lowest in the industry, and 3 business magazines had run features on what they called the Sterling Transformation. Charles Whitmore had resigned from the board 6 months after his failed coup, citing philosophical differences. No one asked him to stay, but the real changes happened outside the glass towers. Victoria learned to cook badly at first, burning everything she touched, until Dorothy finally banned her from anything involving direct heat and assigned her to chopping vegetables instead. She learned to sit through Jalen's endless dinosaur lectures without checking her phone. She learned that Saturday mornings could be spent in pajamas watching cartoons instead of reviewing quarterly reports, and that the world didn't collapse when she wasn't constantly working to hold it up. She also learned that love wasn't a destination. It was a daily choice, made in small moments that added up to something larger than herself. Marcus proposed on a Tuesday, not because Tuesday was special, but because Jalen had a dentist appointment on Monday, and Dorothy had book club on Wednesday, and he couldn't wait any longer. They were sitting on his balcony watching the city lights when he pulled out a small box. "I know this isn't fancy," he said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "I know you could buy yourself diamonds the size of golf balls if you wanted, but this ring belonged to my grandmother. She wore it for 53 years through everything life threw at her. It doesn't have any monetary value, but it has history. It has meaning." Victoria looked at the simple gold band, at the tiny diamond that caught the light, at the man holding it out to her with hope and fear written equally across his face. "Marcus, you don't have to answer right now. I know this is fast. I know there are complications. Your company, your life, the fact that I'm still technically your employee, even though HR has been very carefully not asking questions for months. But I love you. Jalen loves you. My mother tolerates you, which is basically the same thing as love from her. And I want to spend the rest of my life choosing you. Every day. No matter what storms come." Victoria thought about all the reasons this shouldn't work. The class differences, the racial dynamics, the professional complications. The fact that she'd spent 52 years building walls and only 1 year learning how to take them down. Then, she thought about Jalen's smile when she walked through the door. Dorothy's fierce protectiveness that had somehow come to include her. Marcus's steady presence, his quiet strength, the way he saw through her armor to the person underneath. "Yes," she said. Marcus blinked. "Yes." Did I stutter? "Yes. I want to marry you. I want to be Jalen's stepmother. I want to argue with your mother about pie crusts, and listen to you snore and wake up every morning knowing that someone is there, that I'm not alone anymore." "I don't snore." "You absolutely snore. It sounds like a freight train." "Maya never mentioned—" He stopped, the name catching in his throat. Victoria took his hand. "It's okay to talk about her. She's part of who you are. She'll always be part of our family." Marcus's eyes glistened. "She would have liked you. She really would have." "I hope so, because I plan to be around for a very long time." He slid the ring onto her finger, and Victoria discovered that it fit perfectly. The wedding was small by design and chaos by execution. Victoria had originally wanted something simple, courthouse, quick ceremony dinner with family. But word had spread, and suddenly the small event had grown to include Rebecca and her family, Margaret Chen from the board, several of Marcus's crew members from Harrison Creek, Dorothy's entire church congregation, and Jalen's entire second-grade class, because he'd invited them without asking, and no one had the heart to uninvite them. "This is a disaster," Victoria muttered, watching the venue fill with people she barely knew. "This is family," Dorothy corrected, adjusting Victoria's veil with practiced hands. "Family is always a disaster. That's how you know it's real." "I don't know half these people." "You'll learn. That's what the next 50 years are for." Victoria looked at herself in the mirror. The dress was simple. She'd refused anything elaborate, but Dorothy had insisted on the veil, something borrowed from her own wedding 40 years ago. "You look beautiful," Dorothy said quietly. "And not just because of the dress." "Thank you for everything." For accepting me when you had every reason not to. I didn't accept you because you deserved it. I accepted you because my son loves you and I trust his judgment. Dorothy met her eyes in the mirror. Maya loved him completely. She was the kind of woman who filled every room she walked into. When she died, part of Marcus died with her. I watched him walk around for 3 years like a ghost, and I thought maybe that part of him was gone forever. Victoria waited, sensing there was more. Then he came back from that mountain, and something was different. He was still grieving. He'll always be grieving, just like I'll always be grieving my husband. But there was life in his eyes again. Hope. I knew then that whoever you were, you'd given him something I couldn't. What was that? A reason to try again. That's not a small thing, Victoria. That's everything. The ceremony itself was brief and imperfect. Jalen, serving as ring-bearer, dropped the rings twice and had to chase one under a pew. Dorothy cried through the entire thing, despite claiming she wasn't going to cry. Victoria's voice broke when she tried to say her vows, and Marcus had to hold her hands through the stumbling words until she found her way back. But when the officiant pronounced them married, when Marcus kissed her in front of everyone they loved, Victoria felt something shift inside her that she'd never known was possible. She belonged. Completely, irrevocably belonged. The reception devolved into the kind of joyful chaos that Victoria would have found horrifying a year ago. Jalen's classmates ran between tables high on cake and freedom. Dorothy's church friends had brought enough food to feed an army, most of it dishes Victoria couldn't pronounce but couldn't stop eating. Rebecca's daughter, normally shy, had discovered that Jalen shared her love of dinosaurs, and the two of them were now inseparable, in a corner building elaborate prehistoric worlds from napkins and centerpieces. Having fun. Marcus appeared at her side, slightly rumpled from being pulled onto the dance floor by his mother's friends. I don't know what I'm having. It's overwhelming. Good overwhelming or bad overwhelming? Victoria looked around at the chaos, the noise, the mess, the beautiful disaster of people who cared about each other. Good, she said. Definitely good. Daddy. Jalen came running over dinosaur costume, replaced by a tiny suit that was already missing its tie. Daddy, Emily says T-Rex couldn't actually roar because they didn't have the right voice box, and I said she's wrong, but she says she read it in a book, so can you tell her I'm right? Buddy, I have no idea if T-Rex could roar. But you're supposed to know everything. I never claimed that. Yes, you did. You said grown-ups know everything, and that's why kids have to listen to them. Marcus winced. I was speaking generally. Victoria crouched down to Jalen's level. Here's a secret. Grown-ups don't actually know everything. We just pretend we do, so kids don't realize we're making it up as we go along. Jalen's eyes went wide. Really? Really? Your dad and I. We have no idea what we're doing. We're just trying our best and hoping it works out. That's scary. A little. But it's also exciting. Because it means anything is possible. Jalen considered this with the seriousness that only 7-year-olds could muster. Okay. But can you still help me with the T-Rex thing? Because Emily is being really annoying about it. Victoria pulled out her phone. Let's look it up together. And if you're right, you can tell her that Victoria Sterling Thompson says so. You have my name now. I do. How does that feel? Jalen grinned. Pretty cool. He grabbed her hand and dragged her toward Emily, already planning his triumphant vindication. Marcus watched them go, his heart so full it actually hurt. Dorothy appeared beside him. You did good, son. I got lucky. Luck had nothing to do with it. You made choices, hard ones. Every single day for the past year, you chose to be brave instead of safe. That's not luck. That's character. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise. You just weren't listening. Marcus laughed and pulled his mother into a hug. Thank you for everything. For raising me, for helping with Jalen, for giving Victoria a chance when you could have made this so much harder. I gave her a chance because she earned it. That woman fought for you, fought for this family. Anyone who does that deserves a place at our table." Dorothy pulled back, looking at him with eyes that had seen too much and still found reasons to hope. "Maya would be proud of you. You know that, right?" "I hope so." "I know so. She loved you completely, and she wanted you to be happy. This—" Dorothy gestured at the chaos around them. "This is happy. Don't ever let guilt make you think otherwise." 6 months after the wedding, Victoria made a decision. She'd been thinking about it for a while, turning it over in her mind during long meetings and quiet evenings. The company was stable. The board was aligned. Rebecca had proven herself more than capable of handling operations. It was time. "I'm stepping back," she announced at the next board meeting. The silence that followed was absolute. "Not stepping down," Victoria clarified. "I'll remain chairman, but I'm appointing Rebecca Chen as CEO. She's earned it, and the company needs fresh perspective." "Victoria, are you sure?" Margaret asked. "This is your legacy." "No, this company is something I built. My legacy is what I do with the time I have left, and I don't want to spend it in boardrooms." She thought of Jalen's school play, the one she'd promised to attend. She'd made it barely rushing in during the opening number, still wearing her business suit. Jalen had spotted her in the audience and grinned so wide she'd thought his face might split in half. That grin. That was what she wanted her legacy to be. "The transition will take 6 months," Victoria continued. "I'll be available for consultation, major decisions, anything that needs my input. But the day-to-day operations, that's Rebecca's now." Rebecca, who'd been invited to the meeting without being told why, sat frozen in her chair. "Victoria, I'm not ready for—" "You've been ready for a year, you just didn't know it." Victoria smiled at the woman who'd gone from cowering assistant to trusted colleague. "I believe in you. Now it's time for you to believe in yourself." The drive home after that meeting felt different. Lighter. Victoria rolled down the windows and let the spring air rush over her, feeling something she couldn't name at first. Freedom. That was it. The freedom to choose what came next instead of being driven by an empire that demanded everything and offered only success in return. Marcus was in the kitchen when she arrived, helping Jalen with homework, while something that smelled incredible simmered on the stove. "You're early," he said, surprised. "I'm stepping back from the company. Not today, but soon. I want to be here more. For dinner, for homework, for the things that matter." Marcus set down the pencil he'd been holding. "Victoria, are you sure the company is your—" "The company is a thing I built. You're the life I want to live." She walked over and kissed him soft and certain. "I spent 52 years building an empire. I want to spend the next 50 building something that doesn't show up on balance sheets." "Grammy says balance sheets are boring anyway," Jalen offered helpfully. "She says people who only care about money end up sad and alone like the Grinch before he learned about Christmas." "Your grandmother is very wise. She says that too." Marcus laughed, pulling Victoria into a hug that included Jalen. Somehow the three of them tangled together in the kitchen that had become the center of their world. "I love you," Marcus said quietly, his mouth close to her ear. "I love you too. Both of you. All of this. I didn't know I could love anything this much." "That's the thing about love," Marcus replied. "It's not a finite resource. The more you give, the more you have." "That's very philosophical. I read it on a fortune cookie, but it sounded good, right?" Victoria laughed. Really laughed, the kind that came from somewhere deep and true. It sounded perfect. The trip back to the mountain was Marcus's idea. "I want to show Jalen where it all started," he explained. "Where everything changed." Victoria agreed, though part of her was nervous. The lodge held memories that still felt raw. The fear, the cold, the moment when her walls had cracked and let someone in for the first time in decades. But memories, she was learning, weren't things to avoid. They were things to hold to honor, to integrate into the story of who you were becoming. They drove up the mountain on a clear Saturday morning, Jalen chattering endlessly in the back seat about the geological history of the region which he'd researched specifically for this trip. Did you know that these mountains are 65 million years old? That means dinosaurs might have walked here. Maybe there are fossils, and nobody's found them yet, and I could be the one to discover them and become famous and have a dinosaur named after me. That would be something, Victoria said. Jalensaurus. Or maybe Jalen Rex. What do you think sounds better? I think either one would be an honor for the dinosaur. The lodge looked different in daylight in spring without the terror of the storm. Smaller, more ordinary. The kind of place you'd drive past without noticing. Howard was still there, older now, moving slower. His eyes widened when he saw them. Well, I'll be damned, the Storm couple. You remember us? Victoria asked. Lady, I've been running this place for 40 years. You two were the most interesting thing that happened since a bear broke into the supply room in '08. He looked at Jalen. This yours? This is my stepson, Jalen. Hi, Jalen waved enthusiastically. Did you know a big storm trapped my daddy and Victoria here and they had to share a bed to survive, and now they're married? It's like a movie except real. Howard chuckled. That's exactly like a movie, except real. He turned to Marcus. You want to see the room? If that's okay. Room's empty. Go on up. Take your time. They climbed the stairs together, Jalen bouncing ahead, Victoria and Marcus following more slowly. The hallway looked the same, faded wallpaper-worn carpet doors that had seen too many guests and too many years. The room at the end was unchanged. Same narrow bed, same rattling radiator, same window with its view of mountains that had nearly killed them. It's small, Jalen said, disappointed. I thought it would be bigger, like a castle or something. It felt like a castle that night, Victoria said quietly. We were the only two people in the world. Everything else had disappeared. Marcus stood by the window looking out at the view. I was so scared. You didn't seem scared. I was. Not of the storm, of what was happening between us. He turned to face her. I'd spent 3 years convincing myself that Maya was the only love I'd ever have, that my heart was finished. And then you were there, shaking in my arms, and I felt something I thought was dead. I was scared too, of letting someone see me without the armor, of being weak. You were never weak. You were the strongest person I'd ever met, but you thought strength meant standing alone. I was wrong. We both were. Marcus pulled her close, and Victoria rested her head against his chest, listening to the heartbeat that had kept her anchored through the longest night of her life. Jalen had discovered the radiator and was examining it with scientific interest. This thing looks really old. How did it even work? Badly, Victoria said. It barely kept us warm. So what did you do? We kept each other warm. That's what you do when you don't have any other choice. You hold on to the people you're with, and you don't let go. Jalen nodded seriously. Like penguins. Exactly like penguins. They stood there for a while longer, the three of them in the room where everything had changed. Then Jalen declared that he was hungry, and that mountains were less exciting than expected, and could they please go find pancakes now? They could. They did. And as they drove back down the mountain, Victoria watched the lodge disappear in the rearview mirror and felt nothing but gratitude. The storm had trapped her. The storm had terrified her. The storm had broken down every defense she'd spent a lifetime building. But the storm had also led her here, to this family, to this love, to a life she never knew she wanted until she was brave enough to choose it. That night, after Jalen was asleep, and Dorothy had retreated to her room with a book and opinions about its author's poor life choices, Victoria and Marcus sat together on their balcony, watching the city lights spread beneath them. Thank you, Victoria said. For what? For holding on, that night in the storm, every night since then, for not giving up on me when I gave you every reason to. You never gave me a reason to give up. You gave me reasons to hold on tighter. I almost walked away, after the board coup when everything felt impossible. I almost convinced myself that protecting you meant letting you go. But you didn't. But I didn't. Victoria turned to look at him, this man who had somehow become her whole world. Because you taught me that love isn't about protection. It's about presence. Being there for the hard parts, not just the easy ones. Maya taught me that. I just passed it on. Then thank her for me, wherever she is. Marcus smiled, a bittersweet expression that Victoria had learned to recognize. She knows. I talk to her sometimes. Tell her about you, about Jalen, about how things are going. I know that probably sounds crazy. It sounds like love, the kind that doesn't end just because someone's gone. It doesn't end. It just changes shape. He took her hand, their fingers intertwining with the easy familiarity of a year of practice. I loved Maya with everything I had. I love you with everything I have. And somehow, impossibly, those two truths exist in the same heart. Is there room for anything else? Always. Love expands. That's its superpower. Victoria leaned her head against his shoulder, breathing in the night air, feeling the warmth of his body against hers. I used to think strength meant standing alone, she said quietly. Building walls so high that nothing could hurt me. I thought vulnerability was weakness, and connection was liability. What do you think now? I think the storm taught me something I should have learned decades ago. The walls don't protect you, they just keep you trapped, and the only way out is to let someone in. Marcus kissed the top of her head. Took you long enough? Better late than never. Agreed. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the lights flicker on across the city, a million lives being lived in a million different ways. What happens now? Victoria asked. Now we go to sleep, wake up tomorrow, make Jalen breakfast, argue with my mother about something trivial, live our lives. That sounds boring. That sounds like peace. And after everything we've been through, I think we've earned it. Victoria thought about all the storms she'd weathered, the professional battles, the personal transformations, the long journey from isolation to connection. She thought about the woman she'd been a year ago, rigid and alone, and convinced that was the only way to survive. She thought about who she was now. Softer, yes, but not weaker. Stronger, actually, because she finally understood that strength came from bonds, not barriers. I'm happy, she said, and the words felt strange in her mouth, like a language she'd only recently learned. I didn't know I could be this happy. You always could be. You just forgot how. Will you remind me every day if I start to forget again? Marcus pulled her closer, his arms wrapping around her with the certainty of someone who had no intention of letting go. Every day, he promised, for the rest of our lives. Above them, stars emerged from the darkness one by one, indifferent to human dramas, eternal witnesses to stories that began and ended and began again. Victoria Sterling Thompson closed her eyes and listened to her husband's heartbeat, steady and strong, the rhythm that had guided her through the longest night of her life, and every night since. She had spent 52 years building an empire of glass and steel. She had spent 1 year learning to build something better, and as the city settled into sleep around them, as Jalen dreamed of dinosaurs, and Dorothy dreamed of whatever fierce things fierce women dream about, Victoria finally understood the truth she'd been running from her entire life. The storms never stopped coming. They never would. Life was chaos and loss and moments of terrible vulnerability when all your walls came crashing down. But you didn't have to face them alone. You just had to be brave enough to reach for someone in the dark and hold on tight until the morning came.